New Orleans. A heavy, humid August evening. The air feels like a blanket draped over me, the porch's wooden boards swollen from the heat. My mint tea steams in its glass, the vapor slowly rising into the sky while trumpet sounds from the streets remind me that the city's heart still beats. In the narrow alleys of the French Quarter, a group of young musicians must be playing jazz at the corner. The rhythms echo freely, but there's a different rhythm in my heart. Harsher, louder, more painful. The door slams. The sharp sound echoing from the living room hits my heart like a warning. Then my son David walks in. Shoulders squared, face hardened, his eyes far from the warm gaze I once knew. A pang stirs within me. "Mom," he says. His voice is sharp as a thin blade, cold as ice. "There's no place for you at the restaurant anymore." The words pierce my chest. I gave years to that kitchen. Every sauce, every dish carried my soul. Jambalaya, gumbo, red beans, and rice. Every spice measurement, every blend passed through my hands. "This restaurant is mine," I say, my voice calm, but a storm rages inside. My heart trembles, my lips burn, but there are no tears. Because crying would be weakness in this battle. David looks away. A fleeting glance, a mix of guilt and pride in his expression. Behind him, in the shadows, stands Melissa. A triumphant curl at the corner of her lips, a venomous glint in her eyes. "Clara, you should rest," she says in a falsely sweet tone, but each word stings like a needle. I remember the first day I saw her poisonous charm. She had David under her spell, fresh from his prom like a naive boy. And now, after stealing all my years of work, she leaves me with crumbs. My grandchildren, Sophie and Liam, are in the living room, their eyes glued to tablet screens. The world is just digital lights to them. They don't even look up at me. In that moment, I realize, I'm like an old photo hanging on the wall, a shadow fading into oblivion. My heart tightens, my breath shortens. But still, no tears. Silence becomes my anger this time. David doesn't know. Melissa has no idea. But they will find out. Clara's Creole kitchen. Tucked in one of the French Quarter's narrow stone streets. The restaurant Frank and I opened in 1983. In the warmth of brick walls, under candlelight, the heavy scent of spices greeted customers. My jambalaya brought tears to people's eyes, and the gumbo had lines forming at the door. When Frank passed, David was only 19. I buried my grief and never stopped in the kitchen. I sweated through nights, worked until the first light of dawn. I paid for David's business school. Every plate carried my sweat, every bill my patience. I never complained. Because family is patience. But when Melissa came, everything changed. My curtains went to the trash. The photos of Frank and me were shoved into storage. Even my old apron hanging in the kitchen was pushed aside. Slowly, I became a stranger in my own kitchen. I stayed silent, thinking sometimes you have to hold your tongue to keep a family together. But tonight, the words I heard broke my patience. On the porch, my tea grows cold. Streetlights flicker on, jazz melodies fade into the distance. My eyes drift into the darkness. A storm brews within me. Silence will now be my plan. Because David and Melissa think they stole my recipes. But they don't know. Those recipes aren't just on paper. They're in my hands, my mind, my heart. And my revenge will be silent. That night, I don't sleep. I sit at the kitchen table, a jar of spices in my hand. My grandmother's special blend. The secret touch that gives gumbo its soul, unknown to anyone else. As my fingers trace the jar's lid, David's words echo in my mind, "There's no place for you." A bitter smile forms on my lips. They're wrong. I open the drawer. Frank's old notebook is there. Yellowed pages, his shaky handwriting calling to me, "Clara, the recipes are yours. Don't give them to anyone." That notebook isn't just a memory. It's my secret. It's my weapon. I wait for morning. As the city wakes, so do I. But I'm not the same woman anymore. I, Clara Du Bois, have made silence my weapon. Angry, patient, and ready. The first light of morning touches New Orleans' narrow streets as the city's unique awakening stirs. The smell of fresh coffee wafts from corner cafes. Trumpets from young musicians practicing in the morning blend into the streets. My heart is tense but resolute. I didn't sleep all night. The spice jar was still in my hand. I inhaled its scent, my grandmother's voice echoing in my ears. A recipe isn't kept on paper, it's kept in the heart. I pick up the phone, my fingers trembling but my voice steady. Louise. Frank's old friend, our lawyer. I trust her, she's stood by our family for years. Her voice comes through, deep and resolute. Clara, the restaurant is yours. The deed is still in your name. No paperwork has changed that. As for the recipes, they're intellectual property. Your work, your right. It's as if the knots inside me unravel. My breath quickens. So, I say, my voice dropping to a whisper, no one can kick me out of my kitchen. Louise laughs, her laughter carrying years of trust. No one can kick you out, Clara. You're a storm. They don't even realize it, but your silence alone could shake the city. The call ends. My hands tremble, but not from anger this time. A spark ignites within me. I haven't been kicked out of my kitchen, my life. I'm still here. And I'm ready to fight. Frank's notebook sits on the table. His shaky handwriting on yellowed pages. Clara, the recipes are yours. They're an extension of your soul. Don't give them to anyone. My fingers trace the lines. The gumbo, from my grandmother. The spice blend, from my aunt. The jambalaya, entirely my touch. For years, I worked under lantern light at night, tweaking measurements, testing flavors. In the end, every recipe became my family's story. What David and Melissa have are just copies. They're imitating. But an imitation can never match the original. Because food isn't just cooked with ingredients, it's cooked with soul. That day, I couldn't hold back. I went to the restaurant. Walking through the French Quarter's narrow stone streets, I saw my sign, Clara's Creole Kitchen. But beneath that sign, I'm a stranger. I opened the door. Melissa was in the kitchen. She was laughing with the new chef, holding my old ladle. Our eyes met. Clara, she said, her voice sweet but laced with venom. What are you doing here? Just remembering, I said, not breaking eye contact. A moment of silence. Then her eyes narrowed, a scornful curl on her lips. You should rest. Women your age shouldn't strain themselves. I stayed silent. I only smiled. Beneath that smile, a storm was brewing. Because I knew, my silence would become her greatest fear. That evening, I met with Louise. As we sipped coffee at the table, I pulled out the notebook. Prepare the letter, I said. I want my recipes back. We'll officially announce they're using them without permission. Louise nodded. Her eyes held both admiration and concern. Clara, if we file this case, the restaurant will shake. Newspapers will write, people will talk. I know, I said, my voice cold and clear. And I'm not ready, but I will be. They can't see the storm coming. But they'll find out soon. The New Orleans night grew lively, jazz notes filling the air. People laughed as I sat on my porch, sipping my tea. Streetlights flickered. My silence grew. The storm inside me was waiting for the right moment. David and Melissa think they've won. But they've forgotten something. I'm Clara Du Bois. This city knows my voice. And one day, my silence will erupt so powerfully that not only the restaurant but all the lies they've built will crumble. Noon. Clara's Creole Kitchen is as crowded as ever. Jazz melodies from the street mingle with the influx of customers. Tourists snap photos, locals settle quickly at their tables. But inside, in the kitchen, everything is familiar yet foreign. Melissa stands side by side with the new chef, gesturing animatedly. "Modern menu," she says proudly, her voice possessive, as if she's the one who's been sweating in this kitchen for years. I enter through the back door. My spice jars have been taken down from the shelves, their labels removed. In their place are shiny, factory-made bottles. The kitchen's smell has changed, no longer the burnt aroma of chili peppers or the sweet sharpness of garlic. My dishes aren't here. Only soulless copies remain. At the cash register, Sophie and Liam sit. Their small fingers tap on tablets, offering forced smiles to customers now and then. But their eyes are distant, detached. Even the children seem to feel the kitchen's emptiness. David is in the office, wrestling with ledgers. I see him through the door's crack. The lines on his forehead have deepened, his fingers tugging at his hair. The accounts clearly aren't going well. I know the burden he's carrying, but I won't let him use it as a shield against me. Melissa notices me. She raises her eyebrows, her voice commanding. "Clara, stay out of the way. Don't disturb the customers." I just smile. A faint but resolute curl at the corner of my lips. I stay silent. Because I know silence can cut deeper than the sharpest blade. Late afternoon. The new menu is being presented. Melissa steps into the dining area, her face beaming. "Dear friends," she says, "we're presenting Clara's famous recipes with a modern twist." The customers applaud. Some record the scene on their phones, others eagerly call for waiters. Inside me, anger surges. The modernized dishes they're boasting about are cheap copies of the recipes I poured years into, shaped by the touch of my hands. In a calm voice, I ask, "Whose restaurant is this?" A murmur spreads. Heads turn from the tables. Melissa can't hide her laughter. "Ours, Clara. It's time for you to retire. Rest, spend time with your grandkids. Leave this to the young ones." David looks up, unease on his face. I see the internal conflict in him. But his words are merely a plea. "Mom, please. Don't have this argument here." Sophie looks at me silently. There's no fear in her eyes, only curiosity. As if she's asking from the depths of her heart, "Grandma, why are you staying silent?" I smile. To reassure the kids. I lean down and whisper, "Be patient, sweetheart. When the right time comes, everything will change." That night, sitting on the porch, I pull the small jar from my pocket. My grandmother's spice blend. No gumbo is complete without it. As my fingers trace the glass, the storm inside me grows stronger. My phone rings. "Louise." "The letter is ready," she says, her voice carrying a resolute tone. "We're demanding they stop using your recipes immediately. The violation is clear." I close my eyes and take a deep breath. "Send it," I say. "Send it now." In that moment, I know, this isn't just about the kitchen. It's about taking back my life. Protecting the legacy Frank left me, the sweat I poured in for years, the soul of my family. In the New Orleans night, lights gleam, streets hum with jazz. But my silence is louder than that music. David and Melissa think this is just a family dispute. They don't realize. Here is the English translation of the provided text, preserving the original meaning and tone without alteration. But I see it. The storm has already drawn near. And when morning comes, the shadows dancing in this kitchen will carry not only the scent of spices but also the aroma of my revenge. When the letter reached the restaurant, the first light of dawn had barely broken. My phone rang. David's voice lacked the confident tone I was used to, it was pure panic. "Mom, what does this mean?" "This letter from Louise," he said, his voice trembling. "You can't take back the recipes." In the background, it sounded like a storm was brewing. I could hear Melissa's shrill voice. "Clara. This is selfish, do you hear me? We've run this place for years, and now you're ruining everything with a single signature. Selfish. The word left a bitter sting in my throat. I had spent years, nights, my youth in that kitchen. Sleepless mornings, burned hands, children growing before my eyes. And now they were calling me selfish. Who's the selfish one? I said, my voice calm but deep. You kicked me out of my kitchen. You took the home I built with my hands, my soul, and changed it like it was just a signboard. Was I the selfish one? A moment of silence followed. All I could hear from the phone was David swallowing hard. Finally, in a low voice, he said, Mom, the restaurant will go under. Let it go under, then, I said, without the slightest tremor. Then I hung up. I stepped onto my porch. The New Orleans breeze hit my face. In that breeze was the scent of freedom, mixed with coffee and the aroma of fresh beignet rising from the streets. A piece of the burden I'd carried for years dissolved into the air in that moment. The next day, news started to spread. Customers were noticing. The gumbo was tasteless. The jambalaya, bland. The red beans and rice, soulless. Comments on social media began to pile up. What is this? It doesn't even come close to Clara's food. Without Clara's touch, this is just an ordinary diner. Reservations started to drop. The crowds that once lined up at the entrance were gone. Tables sat empty, and even the music seemed to play more faintly. Melissa, in a rage, stormed at the new chef. Her shouts echoed from the kitchen door. You overdid the spices. This isn't jambalaya, it's a disaster. The new chef flushed, sweating under the pressure. David hadn't left the office for days. He sat over the accounts for hours, but the numbers kept shrinking. Meanwhile, Sophie came to me. She climbed onto the porch with small steps, her eyes wet. Grandma, why is the restaurant like this? She said, her voice trembling. I knelt down, stroking her hair. The truth, sweetheart, I said softly. The truth can be bitter sometimes. But it also heals. I pulled her into my arms. Her little heart was racing, but her embrace sought comfort. My plan was working. Silence was my strength. It was breaking their pride, planting the seeds of truth in their hearts. That evening, Louise called. The letter worked, she said. They've removed your recipes from the menu. They announced it officially. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Good, I said. But this is just the beginning. Now the restaurant was bare without my dishes. A building, a few tables, soulless plates. All they had left was an empty shell. David and Melissa had forgotten my strength, the labor of years. But they would remember. They had to remember. I stepped onto the porch, Cajun music rising from the streets. A trumpet pierced the night, its rhythm sinking into my heart. As I sipped my tea, I held the spice jar. It sat in my hand like a small secret. I inhaled its scent. That jar wasn't just spices. It was the essence of my memories, my labor, my revenge. Shadows danced on the porch's walls. The resolve growing inside me glowed like a candle. That night, I danced with my own shadow. And I, Clara. I was ready to dance. Weeks passed. The restaurant was bleeding. First, the reservation book thinned out, then even lunchtime tables stayed empty. People who once lined up at the door no longer stopped by. The aromas rising from the kitchen no longer whetted appetites, instead, they spread disappointment. The new chef's dishes didn't carry Clara's soul. The spice ratios, cooking times, even the presentation, everything was ordinary. Complaints snowballed on social media. This isn't worthy of Clara's kitchen. I used to get excited coming here, now it's no different from a generic cafeteria. Without her touch, this restaurant is dead. Melissa was losing it more each day. Her desperation turned to rage, and she was constantly on the phone. One evening, she sent a long message. Clara, how could you do this? Isn't this your family's legacy? Why are you destroying us? My fingers hovered over the screen, but I didn't reply. My silence was the heaviest response. One night, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, David stood there. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes red, his face marked by sleeplessness. The proud, decisive son I once knew was gone. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. I asked calmly, "Why?" He looked away. "We made a mistake," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Pushing you out of the kitchen, it was a huge mistake. The restaurant is failing. We're desperate." I looked at his face silently. Something stirred inside me, but my expression showed no emotion. "You kicked me out," I said. "You slammed the door in my face that day. Now I'm closing it." David tried to say something more, his lips quivering, but the words caught in his throat. I closed the door slowly. The heavy sound of the wood echoed on the porch. A sense of relief spread through me. This was freedom. The next day, I met with Louise. We sat in an old cafe. The steam from our coffees accompanied our conversation. Louise looked at me carefully. "Clara," she said, "the restaurant is in its final days. You should consider selling it. Or, starting a new one." I stayed silent for a moment, then a small smile appeared on my lips. "A new beginning," I said. In that moment, the sound of a jazz band passing on the street slipped into the cafe. Trumpet, drums, accordion. New Orleans music, pulsing through the city's veins, whispered rebirth to me. My plan was alive. The recipes were mine. The secret of the spices was mine. The real power was mine. David and Melissa were slowly realizing this. All they had was a building, furniture, a sign. The soul was no longer with them, the soul was with me. One evening, as I sat on my porch, Sophie and Liam came. They ran to me with small steps, wrapping their arms around my neck. "Grandma, we missed you," they said in unison. My heart softened, and I hugged them tightly. "I missed you too," I said. The warmth of their little hands melted some of the anger I'd held inside. But I knew, this wasn't their story. They were just innocent figures in it. This was my story. My revenge, my freedom, my rebirth. As the evening breeze brushed my face on the porch, these words passed through my mind. The heart of a kitchen is the soul behind the food. They tried to rip that soul away. But the soul always returns to its owner. And I was ready to write again. A month later, walking through the French Quarter's narrow streets, I saw that old stone-walled building. Its door was slightly crooked, its windows dusty. But I felt warmth inside it. This was where I would be reborn. I stepped inside. Bare walls, rusty faucets, and worn tiles stared at me like a challenge. Still, my heart raced. In my mind, I built a kitchen, large copper pots, shelves lined with spice jars, gumbo simmering on the stove. For weeks, I worked day and night. I painted the walls, replaced old tiles with vibrant patterns. I carefully arranged my spice jars, and the scent of fresh herbs filled the kitchen. One morning, when my new sign was hung, my eyes welled up, Clara's New Creole. The first day, I put my classics on the menu, richly spiced gumbo, jambalaya melded with rice, Creole-style red beans simmered with patience. As the aromas spilled into the street, people gravitated toward the door. First a few curious customers, then familiar faces from the old days, and soon, entirely new people. In no time, the tables were full. Laughter, the clink of spoons on plates, blended with the rhythm of jazz. That evening, Sophie and Liam helped me in the kitchen. Sophie wore a small apron, her hair tied back. Holding a wooden spoon by the stove, she looked at me and smiled. "Grandma, this is amazing," she said excitedly. Liam was trying to carry empty plates. There was pride in every plate his little hands carried. Their smiles filled the void inside me. This new kitchen wasn't just mine, it was their legacy too. Meanwhile, rumors were circulating in the city. David and Melissa's restaurant was losing more customers every day. Online, old customers complained, "Without Clara, there's no soul." The once glorious venue was now on the brink of bankruptcy. One night, my phone rang. It was David. His voice was tired, broken. "Mom, please," he said. "Give us the recipes back. We can't survive without them." I stayed silent for a moment, then answered calmly, weighing my words. "No, David. The recipes are mine. Every spice, every measurement, every secret came from my heart. They belong to me." A long silence followed. I could only hear his breathing on the other end. Then I added, "But if you'd like, you can come as customers. My door is always open to you." The call ended quietly. In that moment, a strange peace spread through me. What they had lost, I had rediscovered. The night wore on, the kitchen warm and bustling. Sweat dripped from my forehead, but a smile was on my face. Plates were filled, tables never emptied, and people's faces lit up as they tasted my food. A feeling I'd forgotten for years swelled inside me, happiness. Outside, New Orleans lights glimmered. Lamps hanging from French balconies painted the cobblestones golden. Trumpets, drums, laughter breathed life into the city. As I looked at those lights, I realized, my recipes were alive. And with them, I was alive again. Silence was my greatest triumph. Not a noisy revenge, but the result of patient waiting. Their betrayal, the lost years, no longer hurt me. Because my kitchen's heart was beating again. This time, no one could rip that heart away. One afternoon, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, there they were, David and Melissa. Tired, pale, as if years had crashed down on them at once. Dark circles shadowed David's eyes, his shoulders slumped. Melissa's gaze was fixed on the ground, the confident, sharp demeanor was gone. "Mom," David said, his voice low. "We made a mistake." He paused, swallowing hard as the words came out. Melissa, without lifting her head, added in a near whisper. "Clara, we underestimated you. Forgive us." In that moment, something broke inside me, or perhaps it was just the ache of old, scarred wounds, I couldn't tell. They had taken my years, my labor, my patience, and sacrificed them to their own ambitions. My own son, my own blood, had stood by his wife instead of me. But there were Sophie and Liam. Their smiles, their innocence, still offered me a bond. I took a deep breath. "For Sophie and Liam," I said slowly. "We can talk." Here is the English translation of the provided text, preserving the original meaning and tone without alteration. David's eyes welled up. For the first time, Melissa could meet my gaze. The silence grew heavy, then we all took a step forward. I opened my arms, and they embraced me. My heart neither fully softened nor fully hardened. That embrace wasn't a redemption of the past, but it could open a door to the future. But one thing I knew, my kitchen was mine. They were just guests. From that day on, nothing changed in my restaurant, on the contrary, it grew. Every evening, the tables overflowed, laughter and the clink of plates mingled with jazz melodies. The spark in people's eyes as they praised my food showed me it was all worth it. Sophie started working at the cash register. Her small hands carefully counted the money, never failing to smile at every customer. Liam cleared tables, sometimes carrying plates, sometimes filling water glasses. Both felt like they were part of the work, sharing the energy of this new life with me. One evening, I saw David and Melissa in the corner of the restaurant. They sat quietly. I brought their food to their table, and they ordered like any other customers. The people who once tried to rule over me were now here, just guests. In that moment, I smiled. A peace spread through me. Silence was no longer a wall between us but a bridge. Forgiving them wasn't easy, and perhaps I didn't fully forgive them. But excluding them would hurt my grandchildren's hearts. This bridge was built not for blood ties but for the healing of the future. That night, the restaurant was packed to the brim. The scent of spices wafted into the street, and New Orleans seemed to breathe with me. Happiness shone on people's faces, my labor marked every plate, and my freedom's sweat filled the kitchen. The scent of spices, that was the aroma of my victory. And now, everyone knew, the power was mine. One evening, as I was closing the kitchen, I felt a stir within me. I knew this story wasn't just mine. I pulled a small voice recorder from the drawer. Its light blinked. I sat at the table, took a deep breath, and spoke. If someone you love has pushed you aside, you're not alone. Silence isn't defeat. Silence is strength. It's the sharpest form of a response. And I learned that. When I finished the recording, my hand trembled. But my heart was lighter than it had been in years. I uploaded the recording to a new account I named Grandma Storytime. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Comments poured in. I was pushed out too, wrote one woman. Your recipes inspired me, said another. Hearing your voice made me feel strong, added an elderly man. My eyes welled up. New Orleans streets were no longer filled only with jazz and spice aromas but with stories too. My words had become a chorus, breaking others' silences. My restaurant became the heart of this change. It was now a meeting point. People came not just to eat but to share their stories. As the gumbo pot simmered, a woman sat at my table, holding my hands. My family forgot me, Clara. But I found myself in your words. You made me stronger. I hugged her. The void inside me filled a little more. Because I was no longer alone. Every evening, new faces arrived, some crying, some smiling, sharing their stories. The restaurant's walls echoed not just with laughter and conversation but with the sound of healing. My small kitchen had become the heart of a community. Sophie looked up from the cash register and leaned toward me. Grandma, she said excitedly, this is a movement. People aren't just coming for the food, they're coming for you. For your words. I smiled. The hope in the children's eyes made me forget the pain of what I'd lost in the past. Yes, Sophie, I said. Maybe this is bigger than the recipes. But I knew, my recipes weren't just food. They were my stories. Each spice carried a memory, each bite a struggle. When people tasted my food, they were eating my story. And as this story grew, silence became a chorus. That night, I stepped onto the porch. The city's lights mingled with the twinkling stars in the sky. The sound of jazz drifted from afar. New comments popped up on my phone. Clara, you gave me courage. I'm not afraid anymore. Your recipes fed my soul. I closed my eyes and gave thanks. Because I knew now, this wasn't just my story. It was everyone's story. And silence, yes, silence was no longer loneliness but a chorus. A year later, Clara's New Creole was no longer just a restaurant, it had become a part of New Orleans' soul. Newspapers wrote about me, television shows invited me. Some even called me the city's spicy grandmother. At first, I was a bit shy, but then I thought, for years, I was invisible, and now I exist through my story, my voice, and my recipes. In my restaurant, everything was still the same. The big gumbo pot simmered, the jambalaya's aroma spilled into the street, and red beans brought tables together. The difference was that these dishes now fed not just stomachs but hearts. People looked at me while eating, sometimes thanking me, sometimes expressing their feelings with just a spark in their eyes. Sophie and Liam never left my side. Sophie stood behind the cash register like a young, determined businesswoman, while Liam moved between tables, giving each customer special attention. Sometimes I brought them into the kitchen and taught them my recipes. But I still didn't write them down. My recipes were with me, etched in my heart like my memories. One day, I'd pass them on, but for now, I wanted them to stay as they were, learned through my hands in the kitchen. David and Melissa had changed too. Their grand ambitions had faded, and they'd started a small, humble business. One day, they came to the restaurant. They sat quietly at a corner table. The old arrogance was gone from their faces. David looked into my eyes and said, "Mom, thank you." There was sincerity in his voice for the first time. Melissa, bowing her head, added in a low voice, "Clara, I'm sorry for underestimating you. You taught us what it means to be a family again." For a moment, old wounds ached inside me. I remembered how they stole my years, my labor. But my grandchildren's faces came to mind. For them, I softened. For the family, I said. But inwardly, I added, my kitchen is mine. The power is mine. Over time, an idea took root in my mind. I decided to start a charity, Clara's Kitchen Fund. Its purpose was to support women who had been pushed aside, forgotten, silenced. I wanted to give them a chance to start anew. Small loans, education, perhaps a path to their own kitchens. Because I knew how hard it was to start over. The first donation was set aside for Sophie and Liam. For their education, their future. Maybe one day they'd take over this restaurant. Maybe they'd chase entirely different dreams. But whatever path they chose, I knew their roots were strong. They came from a legacy forged with spices. New Orleans grew with me. Jazz played on every street corner, people overflowed with laughter. But for me, this city now meant something else, rebirth from loss. My spices hadn't just changed food, they'd changed lives. My stories were no longer just mine, they belonged to everyone who shared them. One evening, as I sat on the porch, Sophie came to me. She held a small notebook. "Grandma," she said, "even if you don't write them down, we are. Your recipes, your stories, they'll stay with us." I smiled. Because in that moment, I understood, silence was no longer just my victory but a legacy. A legacy forged with spices, stories, and love. And that legacy would live on after me. New Orleans greeted another humid, warm evening. From the French Quarter streets, trumpet sounds bounced off the cobblestones, and the colorful signs of restaurants flickered softly. I sat on the porch, a steaming cup of tea in my hand. I had found a balance between the clamor of the crowd outside and the silence within me. Clara's new Creole was overflowing. Inside, laughter, food aromas, and conversations mingled. Sophie laughed at the cash register, chatting with customers, sometimes sharing small hints about my recipes. Liam moved between tables, telling customers the stories behind the dishes, sparking the same excitement and curiosity in their eyes. Their presence eased the weight of the past, letting me look to the future with hope. David and Melissa sat at a table. There was guilt in their eyes but also acceptance. They were no longer just my family, they were my guests, sitting at a table under my rules. Looking inside from the porch, I remembered last year's silent revenge. The days when my recipes were stolen, the times I quietly rebelled. Every spice, every measurement had merged with my silence. And silence had become the deepest revenge. David and Melissa had learned a lesson, but I had one. The restaurant had reclaimed its soul and energy. It was now my creation, my justice. In that moment, it hit me, perhaps this was the greatest power of silence. Winning without shouting, without fighting, by simply moving forward on your own path. If you've ever been pushed aside by someone you love, know that you're not alone. Silence doesn't represent defeat, it represents strength. Subscribe to Grandma True Storytime, because here, revenge doesn't shout. Here, revenge reveals itself slowly, patiently, but decisively. I stepped inside and looked at my kitchen. Gumbo pots simmered, jambalaya grains were carefully stirred, and the scent of red beans wafted through the air. My recipes shone in every plate, and customers felt their soul. Revenge was hidden in a plate of gumbo. Silence was the voice of justice. And justice always smelled of spices. Outside, the lights began to dim. Sitting on the porch, I was alone with New Orleans' quiet night. This city breathed with my story, came alive with my laughter and food. Sophie and Liam's laughter erased the pains of the past, and David and Melissa's quiet acceptance lightened the burden of years. I knew now, this wasn't just a restaurant, it was a legacy. With my recipes, my silent strength, my story, I had united a family, empowered a community, and, most importantly, delivered justice silently but decisively. I took a sip of tea, the scent of spices filling my nose. I smiled. Silence was the taste of victory. And that victory was the taste of justice. New Orleans breathed with me, growing with spices, stories, and silent strength.